Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is David Goodman. I'm the director of the China Studies Centre here at the University of Sydney. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on land that has never been ceded. I acknowledge the influence of the land and the people, its elders past, present, and emerging. It's my great pleasure today to, in a minute, hand over to Beatrice Carrillo, who will be the chair and the moderator for Professor Pun Nai from Lingnan University. I've known both of these people for quite some time, and I know we're in for a treat tonight. So over to you, Beatrice, and take it away.
Okay. Thank you, David, and many thanks to the China Studies Center for the opportunity to chair this session with Professor Pun Nai. But before I introduce Professor Pun, I also would like to briefly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where I'm joining you. I'm joining you from Darrawal land in Sydney Southwest. I also want to acknowledge any First Nations people joining us here. And like David mentioned, to acknowledge that this is stolen land. The sovereignty of this land was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And it is with great pleasure for me to introduce Professor Pun Nai. I have been reading her work since I was doing my PhD back in the early 2000s, and I always get my students to read her work. She's, I think, one of the most influential scholars in the study of migration, labor, gender, and the social economy of China and Hong Kong. But I think that her work has also been highly influential in academic discourses and understandings of labor issues more broadly. And the influence of her work is evidenced by the awards and the acclaim that her publications have received, including the C. Wright Mills Award for her book Made in China: Women Factory Workers in a Global Workplace, which is published by Duke University Press in 2005. And I'm sure that must be some of you who would have read that influential book. And another important and highly regarded publication of hers is Dying for Apple, Foxconn and Chinese Workers, which was co-authored with Jenny Chan and Mark Selden in 2016, and which portrayed, the everyday struggles and workplace violence faced by Foxconn workers who make your Apple phones. So these two texts, both the Made in China and the Dying for Apple, have been translated into several languages. And of course, Professor Pun is a very prolific publisher, very prolific writer, and has published extensively and cross-disciplinary in top-tier journals in the areas of cultural studies, China studies, labor studies, anthropology, and sociology. And this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world, Professor Pun will be discussing the links between youth poverty and precarious employment among young educated workers in Hong Kong. So I'm very much looking forward to her discussion of this topic. So Professor Pun, I leave the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really my honor to share my current study with the audience. And before I begin, I would like to thank Professor David Goodman and also Beatrice for giving me such a nice introduction and give me this chance to share with you. I'm quite sure that for some of you know about my work. I actually spent more than 20 years time in doing migrant labor study. Mostly it's really about men in China. When I returned to Hong Kong, I feel a little bit in debt to the Hong Kong society because I didn't really do do any serious study until the current 3 years. So I was in depth to doing that, even though I was a newcomer to this area. So my current study is really like to two gaps. One gap is myself, which means that I didn't really, I conduct seriously Hong Kong studies. So I was a little bit compelled to do it. The second gap is about literature gap. When I look at property literature, whether in Hong Kong, in the region, or in the world, usually we look at elderly property issues, women property issues, or indigenous property issues. We seldom look at the young people as a property issue, as a property problem, because especially in Hong Kong, when we view young people, we view them as the future of the society. So it's hardly that we can relate poverty or deprivation with the youth. So I try to bring these two gaps and try to present that issue. Yeah. So my major concern is that when I look into the issue, the youth poverty usually is overlooked, both internationally and locally. And so I would like to fill that gaps. And also when we relate the poverty issue to employment, we solely look at the income issues, especially in Hong Kong. The official definition of poverty is the median income. 50% under the median income will be fall into the population of poverty. And then apart from income, we never look at any dimension of employment. So even though certain scholars they will look beyond the income issues, they use a kind of multi-dimensional index. Multi-dimensional poverty index, which means that apart from income, they look at education, health, living standard, all sorts of social exclusion issues. But again, employment issues was kept or missing out. So I would like to bring in the problem of employment into the poverty literature. So I try to formulate a kind of multi-scalar employment trap, which most of the young people actually they will be facing. So I'm using this multi-scalar employment trap to understand the intersection of precarious work and job mobility, and how it creates multiple factors that we can use it to understand the youth deprivation. So this study is a kind of basic call to reconceptual poverty and deprivation, especially in relation to employment. And then I would like to view it not as a kind of separate economic issues or separate economic entity, but as a kind of organic whole. So let me introduce a little bit context of about poverty in Hong Kong. When I look into the issues, obviously there are a few books and also Oxfam reports. They talk about how poverty has been returning to Hong Kong, especially in the new millennium, which means that when Hong Kong moved toward a post-industrial society, and the youth problem obviously become a focus of social policy by the new regime as well. And at the same time, we also observe that youth differences is increasing, and also getting attention when the past 10 years, the major agents that the young people. So I would like to understand whether there's some kind of relationship between youth employment, poverty. Look at from the context of the social, even though I didn't really look at the causal relationship between them. We move the context into the COVID period. Problem is really, it's really appalling. When we look at the latest statistic, When we look at the statistic, from the year 2022, the unemployment rates for the young people, obviously they are higher than the other ages groups. And the unemployment rate for the young people between 15 to 19 was actually 15.7%. And the age between 20 to 29 was 72%. But as a whole, the unemployment rate was 5.3%. So you can see a much higher percentage of young people suffer from unemployment and underemployment. And if we look at quickly about the poverty issues, the latest figure we can have is 2020. The poverty rate in Hong Kong was roughly around 23.6%, which means that we have 1.65 million people they are living under poverty lines. And the whole population in Hong Kong is roughly 7.5 million. So you can understand, how serious the problem is. If we focus on looking at the poverty rates of young people, the percentage was 50.6%, which is, obviously much higher than in 2019. So that's why the and employment issues, they are the indispensable issues for us to understand the social equity, the social inequity issues in general, and the social grievances of young people in particular. And obviously, there's a long-lasting phenomenon if we look at the working poor issue. But on the issue of unemployment and underemployment, currently the issue is underemployment, which means that a lot of flexible work, casual work, most of the young people call themselves slasher or call themselves freelance people. And I would like to see how this creates and how the young people will be falling into the trap, and how we can really conceptualize of the issues concerning economic, social, psychological, and political aspects. So the whole study is trying to look at how the people suffer from precariousness and the casualization of work. At the same time, how they face insecurity from the labor market and unpromising job mobility. And beyond a little bit conceptual factors or structural factors, I look at the subjective experience factor as well. So I look at how those young people perceive poverty, perceive their work-life meaning, perceive their future. So I try to construct a kind of framework. We look at the sense of precarity, which is, look at the economic risk factor, and then we look at the sense of mobility, we look at the social risk factor. And then we move to look at the sense of security, which means that we look at the psychological factors. And then last but not the least, we look at the sense of aspiration and hope, which touch upon a little bit about the political factors. So I use this multi-employment trap framework to engage with today. So as I just mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that when we look at the poverty, the concept of poverty, we either use the medium income, or we look at social exclusion factors, which we obviously cover social, psychological, and cultural aspects. But then they move a little bit beyond the economic factors, which means that they never seriously look at the labor market factors, employment patterns factors, and social mobility factors. That kind of debate was quite missing in the poverty literature. So I try to relate the whole debate into the employment, and hopefully that we can, provide certain kind of insights if we like to enrich or add on certain important aspect into the multi-dimensional poverty index. That kind of multi-professional poverty index is universal use in many components. So more quickly into the research methods, as I mentioned, this is I engage in this research support by Hong Kong Oxfam, for 2 to 3 years time, and then I conduct 2 phases of interview. So the first phase interview, I conduct in-depth interview with 40 young people, most of them actually engaged in creative industry. And then the second phase, I interview another 50 young people, and we try to open up a little bit, I mean, broader into other service sector, because in Hong Kong, we don't really have agriculture sector or manufacturing sector. So I put up a little bit in order to try to provide enough finance to support my argument. So let me quickly move it. Yeah, so this is a kind of 4 aspect of employment trap that I'm going to use it to analyze the research findings. I look at, I mean, the first phase of study, I particularly look at the creative sectors. Most of my students from university, from cultural study, they actually, after graduation, they work or they move themselves to work in the industry, in the creative industries. In Hong Kong, we have 11 sectors of, I mean, composing the whole creative industry. I look at 2 to 3 sectors of it. I try to look at, I mean, how precarious work, formal jobs, stagnant mobility, a sense of insecurity and social grievances, and how they, I mean, how all those aspects create, I mean, how those different aspects they integrate together, and I mean, create a situation for young people and for me to make sense of their lived experience. I must say that not all the young people, they're unhappy. I mean, for some of the young people, if they have a much better background, they have a elite background, and they pretty much enjoy working in creative industry and even working as a lecturer. I can hear a lot of feedback or comments from them that they really enjoy the freedom. They really enjoy the creativity. They really enjoy that they can have the chances to pick up certain jobs or not, or refuse certain kind of job assignment. So I'm saying that not all of them, they are complaining, and not all of them, they are presented in the picture like this. So obviously there's a small percentage of young people, they're very satisfactory with their work or their life situation. But the majority of my interview, the majority of the informer, they present in wrong ways. So let me quickly move into the first trap, which is the sense of precarity. In Hong Kong, we don't have any kind of employment pension. We don't have any kind of unemployment pension insurance. So when I try to compare the labor protection situation in Hong Kong, compare with the situation in most of the cities in mainland China, I would say that the policy, the regulation here is much poorer than in mainland China, which means that in Hong Kong, we don't have unemployment insurance, we don't have pensions. But in mainland China, we at least have the regulation, we at least have the policy. But those policy, those regulation, they will be implemented or not, there's another issue. But at least you have the legal paper. In Hong Kong, we don't even have the legal papers. Most of the informers, they obviously experience quite nuanced experience of employment, and they reflecting a kind of vulnerable life situation, and especially they undergo school to work transition. Not to mention that during the COVID situation, Hong Kong society is recovering itself from the COVID. The situation is improving at the moment. But if we look at young people working situation, I think we observe significant improvement at the moment. Especially when those students they are coming from a background of cultural or creative industry. So most of those arts and design school students, they are really struggle to find jobs, and some of them already reporting that they have to wait for more than half a year to getting responses to have an interview to allow them to get into the labor market, the job market. So in order to avoid deprivation, to avoid poverty, deprivation is another concept to talk about poverty. Many creative young workers, they actually have no choice, but chose to accept more casual work, and some of them call those work freelance work or slash. As I just mentioned, some of them really enjoy it, but the informal tone designer, we complain that actually they are really under huge pressure, and they are often asked to task on, to work on simultaneously multiple roles at once. So, for example, when we ask him, would you call yourself a creative worker? The response from Tom is that won't list the job duties. That means that the company actually, they never list the job duties clearly. And it seems that you need to do everything that they ask you to do. And even though, Tom's major is graphic design, but as he said, I was responsible for filming, designing, recording, lighting, the scene, and even assisting in storyboard creation, animation. So 4 days, you have to finish all the jobs. That is a kind of typical quotation I can provide here to share with you. So multiple jobs, which means that multiple weeks. Most of them, they don't have a labor contract, and most of them, they receive their job, they receive the order through email or through iPhone, through WhatsApp, different kind of social media mechanism or device. And so there's no formal written content, or formal written assignment. So most of them actually suffer from difficult to receive their payment. Some of them, they really have to wait for 3 months after receive their payment. And if they forget, sometimes they, for example, I did interview for a few of them, and then they say in the past 3 months, I accept, more than 10 orders. That means more than 10 jobs. And then one job we do 3 days, another job do 1 week, another job perhaps have to last for 1 month. And then different jobs we pay you in different time. So most of young people, young workers, they never have a estimation, how much they could earn and when they can receive their payment. So you can tell, you can sense, that kind of precarity they are facing. And they have to accept, very unfair payment, very unfair working condition, because they have to really finish the order and then work overtime. Sometimes those young people really haven't sleep for 1 day, or sometimes can be up to 3 days. And for most of the young people I interview, if we look at, usually we don't think health problem is anything related to the young people. But when I interview them, most of them actually suffer from stomach. Sorry, a little bit. That's the situation in Hong Kong. I'm sorry about that. Okay. When I talk to them, most of them actually, they just eat 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, and because they work until midnight and then they sleep until midday, and so most of them just eat 1 meal, and some of them would like to save money to pay for their schedule. So stomach issues is really a problem for most of these young people, even though they never complain about it. Okay, So let me move to the sense of mobility. When we discuss, the job mobility, social mobility issue with them, most of these young people, we really joke about their job prospects. So when we talk about job mobility, they will say that, are you kidding? We just want to keep our job having a more stable income and not to have work overnight too often. So there's, usually lacking prospect, lacking career ladder, low salary increment or promotion. And there's always, concern about lost their job and then suffer from no payment. And freelance work actually dominates the arts and the design industry. And half of them actually, they're the freelancers. And they're actually pretty much struggling to receive orders, especially during the COVID period. And the serious problem they are facing is that they never know the rates of their payment. So different job will give them different rates of payment. And they was really subject to the client's budgets and the needs. So if, for example, in my department, I'd like to ask these young people to do a video to promote my department. I look at my budget and then I give a amount to them. So different client, different company will give a different rates of payment, and there's almost no, there's no chance for them to negotiate a higher payment, because once you negotiate, you're going to lose the order. So that is so there's quite a situation now in Hong Kong. And when we discuss the minimum wage for the young people in Hong Kong, they say that even though whether they earn the wage under the minimum wage, and then without a signed contract, they are subject to work for lower fee and also difficult to pursue unpaid bills. So just give you a quote. Samson, who is really a freelance photographer, saying that, I know that jobs in my occupation are underpaid and unstable, but I have to be prepared to pick up every casual work. The sense of satisfaction I have is to produce photos I like. And you gain fulfillment if you are doing something you have passion for it, and that is freedom. So the sense of freedom, justify for them. Sorry.
You're on mute, Gwen.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I hope it's looking better. I'm so sorry about the situation here. So those, the pursuing for freedom, the pursuing for creativity, really have to pay, really have a cost to pay. So they really, have to accept the sense of insecurity and also, really underpayment work. So Sharon, a Penta activist, also explained to us, I owe my free time, but on the other hand, my income is always unstable. There was a huge sense of enthusiasm when I started to teach drawing, but it has gradually become dumb and it's no longer a relaxing job for me. Okay. Yeah. So you can see that most of those freelance young workers, they have to rely on their network to get job, which means that they have to rely on a network and in sociability, and that create them casual norms to receive work, and most of those work they're pay, and then they become a norms for them, and they create a situation of precarity, and then create a sense of the psychological sense of insecurity. So you can see there's a circle to create a psychological effect. Okay. So let me quickly move to the sense of aspiration and the hope of future. Obviously, those structural constraints, most of the young people, they have to encounter in a very frustrated labor market, and that led them into a sense of powerless and social grievances. And that is because of the sense of precariousness. And usually when they quit their job, or when they give up freelance working condition or freelance situations, that they would like to really settle down themselves. They would like to plan to have a marriage, or that they plan to have children. So then they have to start a new career. So, and that means that entirely leaving the creative industry and then pursue a new life plan and to have a new start. Or some of them, when they move into, reach the point of 30s, and then they feel themselves getting older and older, so they will quit the job and then start a new career again. So you can say that most of those young people when they're reaching the age of 30s, they are struggling to look for more stable and more secure job with a long tenure, as far as possible. So and then preventing to work overtime or overnights. So because of this, because of the precariness and the casualization of work patterns, they suffer from the income insecurity, and also we see little promising of job mobility in the labor market. And as I'm not all of them, but part of them, some of them, they gradually felt hopeless about the career development. And also, as I just mentioned, compared with mainland China government, the Hong Kong government actually provide less protection, in the labor field. So there's no proper protection to these young people, and these young people have little means to resist falling into deprivation. And so you can imagine that dissatisfaction with the government has been accelerated. And some respondents even report that they actually gain a sense of satisfaction from creating artwork as a means of support for the protest in the 2019. They try to redeem their sense of sense of life meaning for supporting the movement. Some of I'm not saying that all of them support the movement, but if they support the movement, they contribute themselves in this way. Okay, so let me quickly move to the conclusion, and we can open up the floor for discussion. So we can see that the youth deprivation in Hong Kong is often unaddressed, and their voices cannot be really heard, or they will not really told you. If you talk to them, they are more eager to express their political grievances. Actually, seldom of them will relate the situation with their socio-economic situation. And the whole society, as a whole, they don't want to explore those dark side effect, or those dark side picture of the young people. They, at the moment, especially after 2019 situation, they would like to portray the young people as the future of the society. So most of those deprivation issues, they would like, and they have to be covered, or they don't want to be disclosed them. And so most of those young workers, you really have to talk to them once or twice in order to open up themselves to this, to tell you their feelings, or to tell the true situation of the working conditions. So I try to use a kind of multi-scalar employment trap to describe, to analyze their working conditions, and this study is an ongoing study, and I would like to, I mean, at the end of the day, I hope to create, three contributions. The first one is about really identify the youth poverty issues in relation to employment issues. And the second one is that I would like to understand, under such a working condition, how the workers' power and the labor agencies, how could they generate or how were they really undermined and challenged by the working condition here in Hong Kong. Because of the trade union, most of the trade union from the grassroots, they have been dissolved in the current 2 years, and there's no civil society they could able to support those situations. And if those trade union they're able to struggle to exist at the moment, their past experience is to support the elderly workers, the construction workers, the cleaners. They don't really have any kind of experience to support the young workers at the moment. So I hope that my study can contribute to some of them if they still would like to, work with me to provide a mechanism or provide a network to support the young workers. Finally, is that I hope that my study can contribute to enrich the multi-dimensional poverty index and see whether a new dimension and on employment can be included in the new index, and so that all factors of employment, all factors of economic factors can be included in this index. So perhaps I stop here, and then we can open floor for discussion. And I'm so sorry about my noisy situation here.
Thank you so much for that talk, Pung Nai. A very interesting study, and I would just want to point out, and this is a characteristic of the research that you do, the rich ethnographic work. This is, as a researcher myself, I know that this is not an easy type of study to carry out. Like, it involves, a lot of planning and a lot of, so that's, at least, I know my students are here. They will be pretty impressed with the kind of work that you've done, the qualitative work, the interviews, and so on. So I just wanted to mention that. And I guess, listening to what you were saying, I can see, parallels to what's happening here in Australia, the same kind of situations for young people. And we know from some studies, for example, that actually the policies to support unemployed and so on did not help young people, because they often went to those workers who had been in unemployment for a longer period. So, I don't know if that, you mentioned that in Hong Kong, the sort of the welfare help from the government is very residual. So perhaps, that adds to the precarity. Two of the things that I wanted to ask you about and highlight before we go on to ask to look at what the audience wants to ask you is around this idea of the effects on both the psychological but also the aspirational aspect of living within this precarity, living in poverty while still working. And one of the things that the studies around precarity tells us that because of this lack of mobility, labor mobility, of job mobility, how we tend to link our identity very closely to our work, especially us as academics. We know about, the links between identity and our profession, what we do. And with precarious work, because there's kind of like no trajectory in terms of for that mobility, that that link is severe. So I wanted to ask you if you could comment on how they see that, because I guess that identity gives us social status, or it kind of places us in society. And I wonder how these young creative workers see that link between their own identity, their place in society, and not having sort of trajectories for advancement within the field of creative industries. And then the other one is you talk about the political implications of having this precarious class, and you would know that in Guy Standing in his work on the precariat, he says the precariat actually a dangerous class because they could mobilize for good causes, but also for other causes that might not be. So I wonder whether you see any kind of like that, because you mentioned how trade unions no longer are able to sort of look after the needs of these workers. How are they organizing? Are they not organizing? Who are they sort of looking at or talking to try to improve their lot? Sorry, I've given you a lot of questions there.
Okay, yeah, very good questions. So I address them first, and then I look at the Q&A box. There's some questions here. There.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me address at least two of you from you. When we discussing about the identity issues in Hong Kong, most of the creative workers or the young people, they're quite proud of themselves by using the label slash. So whenever talk about slash, they like this kind of identity, and then they think they can enjoy more freedom. They can choose their boss, they can choose the job, they can work overnight, and they don't have to get up early in the morning and then rush for work. So I would say that some of them are really proud of that kind of identity, but in reality, the majority actually don't have choice. They are actually waiting for a job. Instead they can really picking up which bosses they would like to work for. and the freedom they enjoy, I would say that sacrifice too much, because you never know your payment, you don't have a contract. And 3 days ago in Hong Kong, there's a serious occupational hazards happen. The producer, the camera producer, they fall from the high, and 8 of them suffer from serious injuries. And that kind of accidents happens in Hong Kong, again, because of no contract, because there's no proper labor relationships. So the compensation is always a problem here. So that's why I'm working with the team and my research team, and then I always convince them that I don't want scientists to do research. I want to provide support to them. But I'm not quite sure whether I'm getting into trouble again or not. So like my situation in mainland China. So we need to wait and see. So the second issue is that whether the psychological impact will be linked to political aspiration. I would say that when we talk to most of the young people, the creative workers in Hong Kong, they want to have this connection. They want to separate them because they are proud of themselves 2 years ago in the movement. So they say they fight for freedom. I mean, in their own. I mean, this is not my attitude. It's their own voice. They say they don't want to link these two together. They say they fight for pure political goal. So the situation here is, I mean, it's a kind of intellectual puzzle to me. It's unlike the Western society or unlike your society that usually you can connect them easily. So the class issue, the social inequality issue will become a kind of political issue. But in Hong Kong right now, these two issues, they're quite separate. And if you talk to the young people, they want to connect them together. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really interesting to hear.